votes were taken on day one of debate on this polarizing bill, so nothing has been decided, but battle lines have been drawn.
There is a rural-urban split.
That line from Senator Ernie Chambers sums it up well. Rural senators say the bill balances out the tax system, saying the state has some of the highest property taxes in the entire country.
We're trying to compete with states who charge $8 in property taxes, and we're at $100.
The bill would raise the state's sales tax by a half cent and start taxing services not currently taxed, like haircuts, vet care, and auto repair. The $370+ million of extra revenue would go to fund public schools, which currently rely heavily on property tax dollars.
We must pick up a greater share of the cost of public education, and that's what this bill does.
But at least two senators from urban centers say it'll hurt those inside the cities. Senator Adam Moorfeld of Lincoln is worried the big school districts like OPS and Lincoln Public Schools will lose the flexibility to ask for more funding as they grow. Chambers of North Omaha says the tax increases will hurt the poor and only help rural parts of the state.
I have not seen a time when the farmers showed concern for any segment of the population other than their own. When there's a flood of their territory, here they come, and we want to bail them out.
Bill sponsor Senator Luann Linehan says the state provides over half the budget for some school districts such as Grand Island, while small districts like Elgin get almost no state funding.
How is that fair? I don't think Nebraskans, if they truly understood that, would think that's fair. And that's what we need to change. It needs to be fair to the taxpayers, and it needs to be fair to the students.
The fate of the bill is unknown because some senators simply haven't made up their mind yet. John McAllister of West Omaha is one of those, and he worries the school funding portion is not sustainable long term.
I think we're not quite there yet. We haven't quite developed the plan that we need to develop.
Now, one amendment to the bill argued today was whether admission to zoos should be taxed. Currently, they're not. But that could change if the amendment is added to the bill and, of course, the bill passes. In the studio, John Kipper, 3 News. When Linda Thorson heard that Nebraska could become the next state to legalize medical marijuana, she needed to tell her son's story.
All you hear about is that it takes away the pain. And we're dealing with something life-changing, it's destroyed his life. He will never be the same.
Greg was 15 when he first tried pot. About a year later, his mom says he was addicted to it. But that didn't hit home until Greg's 21st birthday.
There's just no other way to describe it except for the young man that he was gone.
Greg had a psychotic breakdown and was later diagnosed with schizophrenia. The psychologist said it was his daily pot use that spurred the condition.
All you could see was the terror and the fear, the anxiety, the separation from reality was so evident.
Greg's now 35 years old and has improved, but he's forced to live with his parents and may never be able to hold a job. Linda testified at the state legislature last month against the bill, saying while it may have helped a few people, the unintended consequences outweigh the positive outcomes.
There's not a person on the planet that doesn't have a heart for anybody that's in pain. So why wouldn't you want something if it's going to relieve them? But I'll tell you, walk a day in my shoes. Follow us around.
So that's one mother's story of how marijuana ruined her son's life. But out in Bellevue lives 16-year-old Will Gillen, who suffers from a severe form of epilepsy. His mom says his life would be better with cannabis.
We're not saying that it's a cure or that it's the silver bullet, but however, we do think he deserves a chance to try it.
Will was diagnosed with Lennox-Gastaut syndrome when he was a toddler. He now has the brain function of a 2-year-old and consistently has seizures multiple times a day. Hurting himself so much, he constantly needs to wear a helmet for protection.
Our main goal is to keep him out of the ER every day.
Shelley and Dominic Gillen don't want to leave the state for a variety of reasons. So for the last 5 years, they've been advocating lawmakers to legalize medical cannabis. That's so their son can take the oil and hopefully improve his quality of life.
I'm not concerned about the high that they talk about because my child has been high on FDA-approved drugs since he was an infant. He's a drug addict, not by choice.
Governor Ricketts is against the medical weed bill, saying the FDA has not tested or approved it for consumption. Shelley doesn't buy that argument.
The FDA-approved drugs have really stripped away the quality of his life due to the side effects, and And for us, we feel like the FDA has failed our child.
She also doesn't think legalizing pot medically would make it any easier for kids to get their hands on the drug.
I think it's already happening, and whether it's legal here or not. Teenagers are not waiting around for medical cannabis to be legalized to experiment with it.
Two moms, two very different opinions. Now it's on the Judiciary Committee and the legislature as a whole to decide the fate of medical marijuana in Nebraska. And if the legislature kills the medical weed bill this session, get ready for a petition drive, as a major effort to put medical marijuana on the 2020 ballot will likely kick into full gear. In the studio, John Kipper, 3 News Now. Same message.
Are you ready for a political revolution?
Different year.
With your help, we are going to transform this country and create an economy and a government that works for all of us, not just the 1%.
Senator Bernie Sanders is running again for the presidency and made Council Bluffs his first stop in his return trip back to Iowa. So what's different this time around that would cause Bernie to win the Democratic nomination?
His message is resonating more. I think people are beginning to see what's happening regarding climate change, regarding economic inequality, regarding health care pricing.
In 2016, Sanders essentially tied Secretary Clinton in the state of Iowa. This time around, he says he's going to use the state as a springboard to actually winning the election.
So Iowa, you helped begin the political revolution in 2016, and with your help on this campaign, we're going to complete what we started here.
While he didn't mention it in his speech, the Vermont senator calls himself a democratic socialist. So, can the American people actually buy into and vote for a man with socialist policies?
I think Americans have been fear-mongered by the word socialist since the 1950s. Socialism's not a bad thing.
Sanders at times seemed like he was playing his greatest hits. He spoke about taking on Wall Street, free public college, and a $15 minimum wage.
And I think that really gets to a lot of people who are suffering in our country.
Sanders mentioned President Trump a few times, but mainly steered away, focusing instead on policy.
Honestly, it shouldn't be the main theme, because why give that man that much time?
But Sanders says this election ultimately isn't about Trump.
This struggle is about taking on the incredibly powerful institutions that control the economic and political life of this country.
In Council Bluffs, John Kipper, 3 News Now. Another year, same result. Bills to make distracted driving and not wearing a seatbelt a primary offense will not advance in the legislature. It's a decision that caught advocates a bit by surprise.
I thought there was good questions being asked by the committee, a lot of great information imparted upon the committee. So I actually was fairly optimistic that we could move a bill this year.
It's not clear why the 2 distracted driving bills were voted down. Committee Chair Kurt Friesen told us last year he's against tightening the law until he sees evidence crashes decrease when new laws go into place. Kepi says he sees the numbers, and the problem is getting worse.
We see an increase in distracted driving crashes. That is going up each year.
Tim Wooden's daughter, Ashley, is sadly one of those statistics. She was killed by a distracted driver in 2007. He's disheartened by the continued inaction in Lincoln.
I question the people that represent us, to be honest. To me, it's glaring and it's apparent, but for some reason, it's not getting put through.
I spoke on the phone today with Spike Eichel from the Nebraska Defense Attorneys Association. He says that the glow of the phone alone could be enough to get you pulled over. As far as seatbelts go, he says not wearing one only affects that person.
But Kepi doesn't buy that argument.
The backseat passenger becomes a danger to everybody else in the car when they're not buckled in.
What will it take to get the bills out of the committee rooms and actually becoming law? For seatbelts, Kepi says he saw the senators learning during the committee hearing. He thinks an education push could change their minds. On the distracted driving front, he says the majority of Nebraskans want tighter laws, and the legislature needs to hear from them.
If we could get citizens involved and corporate citizens involved in Nebraska, I think we could make a big difference down in the legislature.
And at least one Nebraskan who has not spoke up at hearings in the past says he's now considering testifying in Lincoln.
It may be part of what we have in store for us. I don't know.
For Safe Roads Now, John Kipper, 3 News Now.